Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, continuing readings on contentment. And when I was looking at this, when I was putting together readings, I realized that there's sort of contentment, it's both a cause and an effect in the path. In the beginning, we have to cultivate contentment, and that takes a lot of work. And then as the path progresses, contentment becomes natural and easy and just a steady abiding of the mind. And so I thought I'd sort of structure my readings around that. And the first reading is just, so in the beginning, initially you have to adopt strategies for cultivating contentment. And one of those is just to remember our ordination. And Luang Por Pasanno has to chant this in Pali every ordination. He chants it with great gusto, and I thought about getting a recording of it, but here's the English of what he has to tell us once he's ordained us. The Exalted One has given permission for these four supports, together with the four things never to be done, to be told by one who has received acceptance. Going forth has almshood as its support. For the rest of your life you are to endeavor at that. The extra allowances are a meal for the Sangha, a meal for a specific number of bhikkhus, a meal for bhikkhus invited by name, a meal given by ticket, a meal given fortnightly, a meal on an Uposita day, a meal on the day after Uposita. Going forth has rag robes as its support. For the rest of your life you are to endeavor at that. The extra allowances are robes made from linen, cotton, silk, wool, hemp, or a mixture of these. Going forth has dwelling at the foot of a tree as its support. For the rest of your life you are to endeavor at that. The extra allowances are a peaked roof building, a pent-roofed building, a multi-storied building, a large flat-roofed building, a cave. Going forth has medical fermented urine as its support. For the rest of your life you are to endeavor at that. The extra allowances are ghee, fresh butter, oil, honey, sugar. So part of the job of a preceptor or teacher is to train new monks in how to accomplish that. And so this is a reading from the autobiography of Ajahn Lee, and it's the time he spent with Luang Por Mun. That year was 1931, the year Chao Kun Upali died. I spent the rains very close to Ajahn Mun, attending both to his needs and to my own meditation. He in turn gave me a thorough breaking in every way. Each evening he had me climb up and sit in meditation on the north side of the great Chedi. There was a large Buddha image there. It's still there today. And Ajahn Mun told me that it was a very auspicious spot, that relics of the Buddha had been known to come there often. I did as I was told in every way. Some nights I'd sit all night without any sleep. We stayed in a small hut in a banana grove. Lady Hip and Long Yong, the chief of police, had the hut built and presented to Ajahn Mun. Nai Tip, clerk in the provincial treasury, and his wife, Nang Ta, made sure that Ajahn Mun had plenty to eat every day. I made a regular practice of going with Ajahn Mun when he went out for alms. As we would walk along, he'd constantly be giving me lessons in meditation all along the way. If we happened to pass a pretty girl, he'd say, "Look over there. Do you think she's pretty? Look closely. Look down into her insides." No matter what we passed, houses or roads, he'd always make it an object lesson. At the time, I was only 26. It was my 5th rains retreat, and I was still feeling young. so he was always giving me lessons and warnings. He seemed very concerned for my progress. But there was one thing that had me puzzled, having to do with robes and other requisites that people would donate. He seemed reluctant to let me have anything nice to use. Sometimes he'd ask for whatever nice things I did have, and then go and give them to someone else. I had no idea what he meant by all this. Whenever I'd get anything new or nice, he'd order me to wash and dye it to spoil the original color. Say I'd get a nice new white handkerchief or towel. He'd order me to dye it brown with dye from the heartwood of a jackfruit tree. Sometimes he'd have to order me several times, and when I still wouldn't obey, he'd go ahead and dye the things himself. He liked to find old worn-out robes, patch them himself, and then give them to me to wear. One morning, I went together with him on our alms round, down past the police station. We happened to pass a woman carrying goods to the market, but my mind was in good shape. It didn't stray away from the path we were following. I was keeping complete control over myself. Another time, when I was walking a little distance behind him, he walked fast, but I walked slowly. I saw him come to an old, worn-out pair of policeman's trousers, thrown away by the side of the road. He began to kick the trousers along, back and forth. I was thinking all along that I had to keep my thoughts on the path I was following. Finally, when he reached the fence around the police station, he stooped down, picked up the trousers, and fastened them under his robes. I was puzzled. What did he want with old trash like that? When we got back to the hut, he placed the trousers over the clothes railing. I swept up and then set out the sitting mats. After we had finished our meal, I went into his room to arrange his bedding. Some days he'd be cross with me, saying I was messy, that I never put anything in the right place. But he'd never tell me what the right places were. Even though I tried my best to please him at all times, he was still severe with me the entire rainy season. Several days later, the old pair of trousers had become a shoulder bag and a belt. I saw them hanging together on the wall. And a few days afterwards, he gave them to me to use. I took them and looked at them. They were nothing but stitches and patches. With all the good things available, why did he give me this sort of stuff to use? Attending to Ajahn Mun was very good for me, but also very hard. I had to be willing to learn everything anew. To be able to stay with him for any length of time, you had to be very observant and very circumspect. You couldn't make a sound when you walked on the floor. You couldn't leave footprints on the floor. You couldn't make noise when you swallowed water or opened the windows or doors. There had to be a science to everything you did. Hanging out robes, taking them in, folding them up, setting out sitting mats, arranging bedding, everything. Otherwise, he'd drive you out, even in the middle of the rains retreat. Even then, you just have to take it and try to use your powers of observation. Every day after our meal, I'd go to straighten out his room, putting away his bowl and robes, setting out his bedding, his sitting cloth, his spittoon, his tea kettle, pillow, etc. I had to have everything in order before he entered the room. When I had finished, I'd take note of where I had placed things, hurry out of the room, and go to my own room, which was separated from his by a wall of banana leaves. I had made a small hole in the wall, so I could peek through and see both Ajahn Mun and his belongings. When he came into the room, he'd look up and down, inspecting his things. Some of them he'd pick up and move, others he'd leave where they were. I had to watch carefully and take note of where things were put. The next morning, I'd do it all over again, trying to place things where I had seen him put them himself. Finally, one morning, when I had finished putting things in order and returned to my own room to peek through the hole, he entered his room, sat still for a minute, looked left, looked right and left, up and down, all around, and didn't touch a thing. He didn't even turn over his sitting cloth. He simply said his chants and then took a nap. Seeing this, I felt really pleased that I had attended to my teacher to his satisfaction. In other matters, such as sitting and walking meditation, Ajahn Mun trained me in every way to my complete satisfaction, but I was able to keep up with him at best only about 60% of the time. And then another, and this, so that's contemplating contentment with a teacher, Ajahn Mun's training. And then here's a passage that describes the drawbacks of not being content. This is in Guttara Book of the Fours, number 157, and the title is Illness. Bhikkhus, there are these two kinds of illness. Which two? Bodily illness and mental illness. People are found who can claim to enjoy bodily health for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, for 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 years, and even for 100 years and more. But apart from those whose taints have been destroyed, it is hard to find people in the world who can claim to enjoy mental health even for a moment. There are, bhikkhus, these 4 illnesses incurred by a monk. What for? Here a bhikkhu has strong desires, undergoes distress, and is not content with any kind of robe, alms food, lodging, or medicines and provisions for the sick. Because he has strong desires, undergoes distress, and is not content with any kind of robe, alms food, lodging, and medicines and provisions for the sick, he submits to evil desire for recognition and for gain, honor, and praise. He arouses himself, strives, and makes an effort to obtain recognition and gain honor and praise. He cunningly approaches families, cunningly sits down, cunningly speaks on the Dhamma, and cunningly holds in his excrement and urine. These are the 4 illnesses incurred by a monk. Therefore, bhikkhus, you should train yourselves thus. We will not have strong desires or undergo distress, and we will not be discontent with any kind of robe, alms food, lodging, and medicines and provisions for the sick. We will not submit to evil desires for recognition and for gain, honor, and praise. We will not arouse ourselves, strive, and make an effort to obtain recognition and gain honor and praise. We will patiently endure cold and heat, hunger and thirst, contact with flies, mosquitoes, wind, the burning sun, and serpents, rude and offensive ways of speech. We will bear up with arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, harrowing, disagreeable, sapping one's vitality. It is in this way, bhikkhus, that you should train yourselves. So then the next passage is an example of this, training like that. This is again from the Kassapa Samyutta. So that's Samyutta Nikaya 16, number 3, and the title is Like a Moon. At Savatthi, bhikkhus, you should approach families like the moon, drawing back the body and mind, always acting like newcomers, without impudence towards families. Just as a man looking down an old well, a precipice, or a steep riverbank would draw back the body and mind, so too, bhikkhus, should you approach families. Bhikkhus, Kassapa approaches families like the moon, drawing back the body and mind, always acting like a newcomer, without impudence towards families. What do you think, bhikkhus? What kind of bhikkhu is worthy to approach families? Venerable Sir, our teachings are rooted in the Blessed One, guided by the Blessed One. Take recourse in the Blessed One. It would be good if the Blessed One would clear up the meaning of this statement. Having heard it from him, the bhikkhus will remember it. Then the Blessed One waved his hand in space and said, Bhikkhus, just as this hand does not get caught in space, is not held fast by it, is not bound by it, so when a bhikkhu approaches families, his mind does not get caught, held fast, and bound amidst families' thinking. May those desiring gains acquire gains. May those desiring merits make merits. He is as elated and happy over the gains of others as he is over his own gains. Such a bhikkhu is worthy to approach families. Bhikkhus, when Kassapa approaches families, his mind does not get caught, held fast, or bound amidst families' thinking. May those desiring gains acquire gains. May those desiring merits make merits. He is as elated and happy over the gains of others as he is over his own gains. So I think that's an important point there. This is an example of mudita, where cultivating contentment by being delighted in the gains of others rather than trying to compete with them. And it also, both these passages point out especially for monastics, the close relationship between being modest and being content, because by showing off, we can try to get more offerings. Another strategy for cultivating contentment is to contemplate the Samsaric perspective on things. So this is from again from the Samyutta Nikaya, book 15, the chapter on without discoverable beginning, and this is number 11. On one occasion, while dwelling at Savatthi, the Blessed One said this: "Bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. Whenever you see anyone in misery, in misfortune, you can conclude. We too have experienced the same thing in this long course. For what reason? Because, bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. For such a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced suffering, anguish, and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. It is enough to experience revulsion towards all formations, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them." And then the next sutta, number 12, happy. "Bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. Whenever you see anyone happy and fortunate, you can conclude, we too have experienced the same thing in this long course. For what reason? Because, bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. For such a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced suffering, anguish, and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. It is enough to experience revulsion towards all formations, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them." And the other point that those suttas make is just, the point is always to be content with the requisites of life, but not to make an effort for getting beyond samsara. And then when that effort is being made well, then contentment is a natural result. And so here, this is, the first passage I'll read here is actually a bit from, just an excerpt from the Anuruddha's sutta that we've been basing this discussion on. So this is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Eights, 30. But one part of this sutta specifically deals with contentment. When, Anuruddha, you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great person and gain at will, without trouble or difficulty, these 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and are pleasant dwellings in this very life, then, while you are dwelling contentedly, your rag robe will seem to you as a chest full of various colored garments seem to a householder, or to a householder's son, and it will serve for your delight, relief, and ease, and for entering on nibbana. When you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great person and gain at will, without trouble or difficulty, these 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and are pleasant dwellings in this very life, then, while you dwell contentedly, your scraps of alms food will seem to you as a dish of rice cleaned of black grains and served with many gravies and curries seems to a householder or a householder's son, and they will serve for your delight, relief, and ease, and for entering upon nibbana. When you reflect upon these 8 thoughts of a great person and gain at will these 4 jhanas, then while you dwell contentedly, your dwelling place at the foot of a tree will seem to you as a house with a peaked roof, plastered inside and out, draft-free, with bolts fastened and shutters closed, seems to a householder or a householder's son, and it will serve for your delight, relief, and ease, and for entering upon Nibbana. When you reflect on those 8 great thoughts of a great person and gain at will these 4 jhanas, then, while you dwell contentedly, your bed and seat made of straw will seem to you as a couch spread with rugs, blankets, and covers, with an excellent covering of antelope hide, with a canopy above and red bolsters at both sides, seems to a householder or a householder's son, and it will serve for your delight, relief, and ease, and for entering upon Nibbana. When you reflect upon these 8 thoughts of a great person and gain at will these 4 jhanas, then while you dwell contentedly, your medicine of fermented cow's urine will seem to you as various medicaments of ghee, butter, oil, honey, and molasses seem to a householder or a householder's son, and it will serve for your delight, relief, and ease, and for entering upon Nibbana. And then the final passage about the Buddha himself. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Alawi, on a heap of leaves spread out on a cow track in a sampasa grove. Then Hataka of Alawi, while walking and wandering for exercise, saw the Blessed One sitting there. He then approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and said to the Blessed One, "Bhante, did the Blessed One sleep well?" "Yes, Prince, I slept well. I am one of those in the world who sleep well." "But, Bhante, the winter nights are cold. It is the 8-day interval, the time when snow falls. The ground trampled by the hooves of cattle is rough. The spread of leaves is thin. The leaves on the trees are sparse. The ochre robes leave one cold, and the gale winds blow cold. Yet the Blessed One says thus, 'Yes, Prince, I slept well. I am one of those in the world who sleep well.' Well then, Prince, I will question you about this matter. You should answer as you see fit. What do you think, Prince? A householder or a householder's son might have a house with a peaked roof, plastered inside and out, draft-free, with bolts fashioned and shutters closed. There he might have a couch spread with rugs, blankets, and covers, with an excellent covering of antelope hide, with a canopy above and red bolsters at both ends. An oil lamp would be burning, and his 4 wives would serve him in extremely agreeable ways. What do you think? Would he sleep well or not?" "He would sleep well, Bhante. He would be one of those in the world who sleep well." "What do you think, Prince? Might there arise in that householder or householder's son bodily and mental fevers born of lust, which would torment him so that he would sleep badly?" "Yes, Bhante." "There might arise in that householder or householder's son bodily and mental fevers born of lust, which would torment him so that he would sleep badly. But the Tathagata has abandoned such lust, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it, so that it is no more subject to future arising. Therefore I have slept well." "What do you think, Prince? Might there arise in that householder or householder's son bodily and mental fevers born of hatred, or bodily and mental fevers born of delusion, which would torment him so that he would sleep badly?" "Yes, Bhante." "There might arise in that householder or householder's son bodily and mental fevers born of delusion, which would torment him so that he would sleep badly. But the Tathagata has abandoned such delusion, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to future arising. Therefore I have slept well." And some verses. "He always sleeps well, the Brahman who has attained Nibbana, cooled off, without acquisitions, not tainted by sensual pleasures. Having cut off all attachments, having removed anguish in the heart, the peaceful one sleeps well, having attained peace of mind." So that's the ultimate contentment. So, questions or comments?
Sutta where the Buddha is saying, with these 8 thoughts, and if you can attain jhana at the same time, then, then those are the prerequisites for that sort of contentment. And just, I know there's a sutta where the Buddha speaks about, maybe someone can remember which one it was, but even if one sees the drawback of sensual pleasures, unless they've found, I think he references specifically the joy, the joy of jhana, you still will fall back to the sensual pleasures because you don't have anywhere else to go. I actually am really curious which sutta that is, if someone remembers. And just, and I remember asking Luang Por Pasanno about what he saw as the most important ingredient in terms of people staying monks as a long time, and he's just spoke about how you've got to find some sort of internal happiness in this life. I mean, obviously, right? But it just strikes me, no matter how much you want to wean yourself off those sensual pleasures, or the ways you found happiness before, and that sort of the contentment with the pretty austere lifestyle in some ways, unless there's some sort of happiness to replace it, it's, it can be a bleak landscape, and I don't think you can last too long. I don't know what the Ajahns think.
Well, I would tend to agree with that.
It reminds me of another sutta, and I don't recall where this one is, where the Buddha says that a bhikkhu or a samana who has given up sensual pleasures but continues to sort of pursue those and torment himself with thoughts of sensuality is sort of injured himself on both sides. He's giving up the household pleasures, but he doesn't cultivate the renouncing pleasures, and therefore sort of loses on both accounts.
Isn't it also that one where he's if someone goes into the forest and tries to live secluded but doesn't have jhana, if you have jhana and go into the forest, you're like an elephant playing in a pool, but if you don't, you're like a cat being thrown into the pool. Or something like that.
I just had a question. There was a sutta about, it was called No Discoverable Beginning or something. And it had a word in there. It was revulsion towards all formations. And I guess that's Sankara. But I was wondering if is that an old translation, where revulsion is a different, is using a different word,
let me
Viraga or something like that.
Right.
So it seems a little bit strong, but
yeah.
I think I remember seeing that in other places.
Yeah, that was revulsion was Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation for nibbida in the Samyutta Nikaya only. Both before and after that, he has translated it as disenchantment.
Oh, so that you're reading from this, and is that correct?
Yes, this one was from. Let me get that. This one was from the.
So you think the Pali would be nibbida?
I think so. Enough to experience. Yeah, that. Yeah, wow. Huh. And I think in my own memorization, I copied that out as disenchantment. But actually reading the text, it's revulsion, because that's how Bhikkhu Bodhi chose to translate it this time, but got enough feedback that revulsion is probably too strong.
It does seem a little bit, extreme. But then it was you see that sort of thing in other places, there's a similar line in the Giri Mananda Sutta, one of the contemplations about related to Sankara, it might almost be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I looked at the Pali once, and there's a word, it's Jigu Chani, something like that. And it's
Jigu Chani, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes they use it in relation to contemplation of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And that word is used sometimes in that context. And it has a very strong meaning. It's that's definitely in the text.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about the meaning of that is kind of, why would, I guess in relation to Sankhara, like dispassion and that sort of thing, I definitely see, but like more sort of negative side of it, I guess.
My sense is that one needs to know the skillful time to use these, because when it's that strong, like in the Girimananda Sutta, the Jaguchiti comes up, and it is revulsion towards all formations, if I remember correctly. But you look at where that is, a couple contemplations on Nibbana come before that. This is not somebody who is, this is not someone who's sort of a complete worldling, reflecting on the world. Here what you're reflecting on is probably deep meditation, and you're trying to distance yourself from sort of whatever's going on in the mind, because you're looking for something beyond that, rather than. So that might be in that context. That might be my interpretation of it. Yeah. But again, you have to. The Buddha's teachings are always about paying attention to the results, and sometimes, and probably in persistence, I'll do some readings where the Buddha almost seems to contradict himself on certain points, but it's not. The thing is, you use what you need. Rather, we're not trying to. This is not sort of. Doctrine is not the primary focus here.
Well, I think that's helpful. Like thinking about the context, like you said, like it comes after the contemplations about like nibbana, like this is peaceful, this is sublime, the stilling of all sankhara, and then when you said that, I was like, yeah, it connects with some suttas where it's talking about jhana, and like within jhana. Then you'll be in the first or second jhana or whatever, and then there's this contemplation, like things related to form or vedana or sanya or sankhara, the aggregates are seen as like a dart, a tumor, a cancer, a disease. It's like all these conditioned phenomena, all these, the sort of mind that's attached to those things is talked about in very negative terms, because that's, it's the attachment to the sankhara that's preventing you from seeing, the deathless. And so in that context, I think that really, that makes a lot of sense.
I think Anuruddhamahavitakka once said, if I could take Nibbana out and show it to you, you wouldn't want anything else.
Ajahn,
yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts on the Girimananda Sutta, like the contextualizings, because you're right, there's those two contemplations of the being horrified, humiliated, disgusted with all formations, and then distaste for every world. But then it ends with the anapanasati. What are your thoughts on the finishing note being breath meditation on? Because you're right, it leads in those two on nibbana, but then the end one is anapanasati. I always thought that was really interesting. I thought it was like highly analytical kind of.
Well, I mean, I guess I wouldn't wait to get the other 9 contemplations fully in order before you start practicing mindfulness of breathing. I think it's more all 9 of them can be used during with mindfulness of breathing.
I mean, you could even think of it, I was thinking like, there's these other ones that are more like related to right view, and like this is how you should view things, but then putting anapanasati as the 10th, it's like, this is even if your view is right, you keep going with this, to overcome all the hindrances. It's like, this is like it's like you got all this stuff with you down, here's the practice, cultivate this sort of thing. Because usually, and I always take note of this, like in different teachings, there is really there's an order to the way things are put in there. Like the 10 dhammas, we reflect on when one has gone forth, there's definitely like a sila, samadhi, panya kind of sort of progression in a lot of these, and it's not just kind of random how they're put in there.
Yeah, that's what's curious about it. And also, then again, the Buddha to say that anapanasati is the abode of the Tathagata, and I doubt he has to think very often about, the disgustingness of the world. Like, so in certain ways, anapanasati is the basis and maybe